I never thought a pile of rocks would nearly land me in court, but that's exactly what happened when Patricia Morrison decided my rock garden was an eyesore that threatened the very fabric of our planned community in Scottsdale, Arizona. It started on a Tuesday morning in March when I was out front arranging the final pieces of my desert landscape project. I had spent 3 months planning this rock garden, carefully selecting native Arizona stones in warm terracotta shades and cool grays that complemented the natural desert surroundings. The whole thing sat squarely on my property, ending a full 6 inches from the official property line according to the survey I had paid $500 to have done. I was crouched down, adjusting a particularly beautiful piece of rust-colored sandstone when I heard the clicking of heels on pavement. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you are doing?" I looked up to see Patricia Morrison standing at the edge of my driveway, her arms crossed over her chest, her face pinched in disapproval. She was wearing what I had come to recognize as her uniform: pressed khaki pants, a polo shirt with the Sunset Ridge HOA logo embroidered on the chest, and an expression that suggested she had just caught someone dumping toxic waste in a kindergarten playground. "Hey, Patricia," I said, standing up and brushing the dust off my jeans. "Just finishing up my rock garden. What do you think?" Her eyes narrowed. "I think you should have submitted a landscape modification request to the Architectural Review Committee before you started this project." I felt my stomach drop. "I did submit one, back in December. I got approval in January." "Let me see the approval letter," she demanded, pulling out her phone as if she was about to document evidence of a crime. I walked over to my garage and retrieved the folder I kept with all my HOA documentation. My hands were already starting to shake with frustration, and I hadn't even been arguing with her for more than 2 minutes. That was Patricia's special talent. She could make you feel like a criminal for breathing wrong within the boundaries of Sunset Ridge. I handed her the letter, which clearly stated that my desert rock garden had been approved by the Architectural Review Committee, contingent upon using native plants and ensuring all installations remained within my property boundaries. Patricia read it 3 times, her lips moving slightly as she processed each word. "This approval is for a rock garden along the side of your house," she said finally, pointing at the paper. "You have installed it along the front." "The application said front yard rock garden," I countered, taking the letter back and showing her where I had clearly written those exact words. "See, right here, front yard." Patricia's face was turning an interesting shade of red. "The committee must have misread your application. This was never intended to be approved for the front yard. Rock gardens belong in the back where they don't impact the aesthetic cohesion of the neighborhood." "Aesthetic cohesion," I repeated. "Patricia, we live in Arizona. Half the houses on this street have desert landscaping with rocks." "Those are decorative accent pieces," she snapped. "What you have created is an eyesore that lowers property values and violates the spirit of our community guidelines, even if you somehow manage to trick the committee into giving you technical approval." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I didn't trick anyone. I submitted a detailed application with photographs of what I planned to do. The committee approved it. I followed all the rules." "We will see about that," Patricia said, turning on her heel and marching back toward her house 3 doors down. "I am calling an emergency committee meeting. You will be hearing from us very soon, Isaac." I watched her go, feeling the familiar cocktail of anger and anxiety that seemed to accompany every interaction with Patricia Morrison. She had been the president of the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association for 3 years, and in that time, She had transformed what should have been a simple neighborhood organization into something resembling a totalitarian microstate. Nothing escaped her notice. She had fined the Hendersons $200 for having their trash cans visible from the street for 20 minutes past the designated collection time. She had taken the Rodriguezes to arbitration over the shade of beige they had painted their front door, claiming it was too yellow. She had even tried to ban children from riding bikes in the street because the tire marks were damaging the aesthetic quality of the pavement. My name is Isaac Carmichael, and I am a 42-year-old civil engineer who works for the city of Scottsdale. I bought my house in Sunset Ridge 4 years ago, right after my divorce was finalized. It was a fresh start, a place where I could rebuild my life and create a space that felt like mine. The house itself was nice enough. A standard single-story ranch with 3 bedrooms and a 2-car garage, but the yard had been neglected by the previous owners. The front lawn was a water-guzzling nightmare of Bermuda grass that required constant maintenance and thousands of gallons of water to stay green in the brutal Arizona heat. When I decided to rip out the grass and install a desert landscape, I had done everything by the book. I researched native plants, hired a landscape designer to help me create a plan that would be both beautiful and ecologically responsible, and submitted my application to the HOA with plenty of time for review. The approval letter had come back with only minor notes about ensuring the plants I selected were on the approved list and that all hardscape elements remained within my property boundaries. I had followed every single guideline. My rock garden was gorgeous, if I did say so myself. I had created gentle berms using the natural contours of the land, arranged the rocks in organic groupings that mimicked formations you would find in the Sonoran Desert, and planted native species like agave, ocotillo, prickly pear cactus, and desert marigold. The whole thing required almost no water, would never need mowing, and attracted local birds and butterflies. It was exactly the kind of landscaping that Arizona environmental groups encouraged homeowners to adopt. But Patricia Morrison did not care about environmental responsibility or water conservation or following the actual rules. She cared about control, and I had just become her latest target. 3 days after our confrontation, I received a certified letter from the HOA. I signed for it with a sense of dread, already knowing what it would say. Sure enough, the letter informed me that my rock garden was in violation of the community covenant's conditions and restrictions, and that I had 30 days to remove it and restore my front yard to an approved state, or face daily fines of $100. I read the letter twice, then called my friend Marcus Webb, who was a real estate attorney. Marcus and I had been friends since college, and he had helped me navigate some of the legal complexities of my divorce. He was also familiar with HOA disputes, having represented several clients in similar situations. "They are claiming your rock garden violates the CCRs," Marcus asked after I explained the situation. "But you have written approval from the architectural committee." "That's what makes this so insane," I said, pacing around my living room. "Patricia is claiming the committee misunderstood my application and that the approval should be voided." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Can you email me copies of your original application, the approval letter, and this new violation notice? I will send them right now." I spent the next hour scanning and emailing documents to Marcus. While I waited for his response, I went outside and stood in my driveway, looking at my rock garden. It really was beautiful. The afternoon sun was hitting the rocks at an angle that made them glow in shades of amber and copper. A hummingbird was investigating the red blooms on my tuberosa bush. A desert spiny lizard was sunning itself on one of the larger boulders. This was what Arizona landscaping was supposed to look like. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Okay, I have reviewed everything," he said. "Here is the situation. Your application was absolutely clear. The approval letter is unambiguous. The HOA has no legal grounds to claim the committee misunderstood anything. You are in full compliance with the CCRs as they are written." So, what is Patricia's angle here? "She is betting that you will cave and remove the garden rather than fight back," Marcus explained. "Most people do not want the hassle and expense of challenging an HOA, even when the HOA is completely in the wrong. These organizations rely on intimidation and the threat of fines to enforce their will, regardless of what the actual rules say. What do I do? Write a response letter citing your approval and stating that you are in full compliance with all HOA regulations. Send it certified mail. Keep copies of everything, and do not remove that rock garden. If they try to fine you, we will take them to court." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thanks, Marcus. I really appreciate this." "One more thing," Marcus added. "Document everything. Take photos of your rock garden from multiple angles. Take photos showing how far it is from the property line. If Patricia or anyone from the HOA comes to your house, make notes of what they say and when they say it. The more documentation you have, the better." I spent the rest of that evening photographing my rock garden from every conceivable angle. I measured the distance from each rock to the property line and took photos of the tape measure. I even went to the county recorder's office the next day and got a certified copy of my property survey, which showed exactly where my boundaries were. My response letter to the HOA was polite but firm. I stated that my rock garden had been approved through the proper channels, that it met all requirements in the CCRs, and that I had no intention of removing it. I sent the letter certified mail and kept a copy for my records. Patricia's response came faster than I expected. 2 days after my letter was delivered, she showed up at my door at 8 in the evening. I was eating dinner when the doorbell rang. "Isaac, we need to discuss this situation like adults," she said when I opened the door. She had not been invited in, but she was already trying to peer past me into my house. "I thought my letter was pretty clear, Patricia. The rock garden is staying." "You are being unreasonable," she said, her voice taking on a strained quality that suggested she was working hard to control her temper. "The committee members have reviewed the situation and agree that the approval was issued in error. You have that in writing from the committee members." She blinked. "I do not need to provide you with internal committee communications." "Actually, you do if you are going to claim they agree with you," I said. "The CCRs state that all official HOA decisions must be documented and made available to homeowners upon request. So I am formally requesting copies of any communications or meeting minutes in which the committee discussed my rock garden." Patricia's face was turning red again. "You are going to regret this attitude, Isaac. I have been president of this HOA for 3 years, and I have never had a homeowner show such blatant disrespect for the community standards that make Sunset Ridge a desirable place to live." "I have shown nothing but respect for the actual rules," I countered. "What I have not shown is blind obedience to your personal preferences, which is apparently what you expect." "Fine," she said, her voice going icy. "You want to do this the hard way. We will do it the hard way. The HOA board will be voting to impose fines at our meeting next week. I hope your little pile of rocks is worth thousands of dollars to you." She left without another word. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I had never been the type of person who enjoyed conflict. In fact, I usually went out of my way to avoid it. But something about Patricia's bullying tactics brought out a stubborn streak in me that I did not even know I had. I called Marcus again and told him about the conversation. "She came to your house at 8 at night to intimidate you." Marcus sounded genuinely surprised. "That is incredibly unprofessional. Did you record the conversation?" "No, but I took notes as soon as she left. I wrote down everything she said while it was still fresh in my memory." "Good. Keep doing that, and Isaac. This woman sounds unhinged. Be careful. Some HOA board members take this stuff way too personally." The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at 7 in the evening. It was held in the community center, a small building near the entrance to our neighborhood that was used for HOA meetings and the occasional resident event. I arrived at 6:55 and found a seat in the back row. About 20 other residents were scattered around the room, most of them looking bored or resigned. Patricia was at the front, along with 4 other board members: Tom Hendricks, the vice president, Sharon Palmer, the treasurer, David Wu, the secretary, and Linda Foster, a member at large. They were all seated behind a long table, with stacks of papers and binders in front of them. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. They went through the usual business, approving the minutes from the last meeting, discussing the budget for landscaping the common areas, reviewing bids for repainting the community center. I sat there trying not to fidget, knowing that my rock garden was somewhere on the agenda. Finally, at 7:45, Patricia cleared her throat and said, "We now need to address a violation that has come to the board's attention. Isaac Carmichael, who resides at 847 Desert Willow Court, has installed a rock garden in his front yard that violates our community standards." I raised my hand. "I would like to speak to that." Patricia looked annoyed. "You will have an opportunity to speak after the board has presented its findings." "Actually, the CCRs state that homeowners have the right to address the board before any vote is taken on a matter that directly affects them," I said, standing up. I had read the CCR's cover to cover 3 times in preparation for this meeting. David Wu, the secretary, leaned over and whispered something to Patricia. She looked even more annoyed but nodded curtly. "Fine, you have 3 minutes." I walked to the front of the room, my mouth dry. "Thank you. As you all know, I submitted an application to install a desert rock garden in my front yard last December. That application was reviewed by the Architectural Committee and approved in January. I have the approval letter with me if anyone would like to see it. I held up the letter. Several board members leaned forward to look at it, but Patricia waved it away. "The approval was issued in error," she said. "The committee misunderstood your application." "My application was crystal clear," I said, keeping my voice level. It included detailed descriptions, photographs of similar installations, and a site plan showing exactly where the rock garden would be located. The committee had more than a month to review it, ask questions, or request clarification. They approved it without any concerns. I then spent considerable time and money implementing the approved plan. You cannot retroactively void an approval just because you personally do not like how it turned out. Tom Hendricks, the vice president, spoke up. "Mr. Carmichael, I was on the Architectural Committee when your application was reviewed. I do not recall any discussion about the scope of the rock garden." "That is because there was nothing to discuss," I said. "The application was straightforward. If the committee had concerns, they should have raised them before approving it." Sharon Palmer, the treasurer, raised her hand. "I have a question. Is the rock garden entirely on your property?" "Yes. I had a survey done to confirm the exact location of my property lines." "The rock garden is entirely within my boundaries, with at least 6 inches of clearance from the property line on all sides. "Then I do not understand what the violation is," Sharon said, looking at Patricia. "If he got approval and the installation is on his property, what exactly is the problem?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "The problem is that it is an eyesore that negatively impacts our neighborhood. We have standards here for a reason." "But our standards say that homeowners can install desert landscaping with rock gardens if they get committee approval," David Wu said, flipping through a binder. "It says so right here in Section 7.3 of the CCRs. The spirit of that provision is for small decorative rock features, not an entire front yard covered in boulders," Patricia insisted. "The provision does not specify size limitations," David countered. "It just says rock gardens are permitted with approval. Mr. Carmichael got approval." I could see Patricia getting flustered. This was not going the way she had planned. Linda Foster, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke. "Patricia, I have driven by Mr. Carmichael's house several times since this issue came up. His rock garden is actually quite attractive. It is certainly better than the dead grass that was there before, and he is right that many other houses in the neighborhood have similar landscaping." "Those are accent pieces," Patricia snapped. "This is different." "How is it different?" Linda asked. "I think we need to be very careful here. If we start fining homeowners for installations that were properly approved, we are opening ourselves up to serious legal liability." Tom Hendricks nodded slowly. "Linda has a point. Patricia, did you consult with our HOA attorney before bringing this to the board as a violation?" Patricia looked like she had just swallowed something sour. "I did not feel it was necessary. The violation is obvious." "I disagree," Sharon said. "Mr. Carmichael, thank you for your comments. I think the board needs to discuss this matter further before taking any action." I returned to my seat, feeling cautiously optimistic. The board went into a heated discussion that lasted almost 30 minutes. Patricia was clearly furious that the other board members were not backing her up. At one point, her voice rose so loud that people in the audience started whispering to each other. Finally, David Wu made a motion that the board would table the matter pending a legal review by the HOA's attorney. Tom Hendricks seconded the motion. It passed 4-1, with only Patricia voting against it. Patricia's face was like stone as she adjourned the meeting. I left the community center feeling like I had dodged a bullet, but I knew this was not over. Patricia Morrison was not the type of person who accepted defeat gracefully. I was right. 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find a notice taped to my front door. It was not from the HOA. It was from the City of Scottsdale Code Enforcement Division. Someone had filed a complaint claiming that my rock garden was a safety hazard because it obstructed driver visibility at the corner of my property. This was absurd for several reasons. First, my house was not on a corner lot. It was in the middle of the block with houses on both sides of me. Second, my rock garden was low to the ground, with the tallest rocks only about 3 feet high. There was no way it could obstruct anyone's view of anything. Third, I worked for the city. I knew exactly what constituted a code violation, and this was not it. I called the code enforcement office and asked to speak to whoever had been assigned to my case. I was transferred to a man named Robert Hayes, who sounded tired and overworked. "Mr. Carmichael, I have your file here," he said. "We received a complaint about a possible visibility obstruction. I will need to come out and inspect your property. Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" Complaints can be filed anonymously, but in this case, the complainant identified herself as Patricia Morrison, president of your homeowners association. Of course it was Patricia. "Mr. Hayes, I work for the city in the engineering department. I am familiar with the code requirements for visibility triangles and setbacks. My rock garden does not violate any of those requirements. In fact, it is not even on a corner lot where those requirements would apply. I understand, Mr. Carmichael, but I still need to conduct an inspection. It is my job. I can come out tomorrow afternoon if that works for you. We scheduled the inspection for the next day at 3. I took the afternoon off work and was waiting in my driveway when Robert Hayes pulled up in a white city truck. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a friendly demeanor. We shook hands and I walked him around my property, showing him the rock garden and explaining how it had been designed and installed. Robert took measurements, checked sight lines, and made notes on a tablet. After about 20 minutes, he turned to me and shook his head. Mr. Carmichael, there is no violation here. Your rock garden is well within code requirements. You are not on a corner lot, so visibility triangle regulations do not apply. Even if you were, your rocks are low enough that they would not create an obstruction. I tried to tell Patricia Morrison that, but she does not seem interested in facts. Robert sighed. Look, I should not be telling you this, but Miss Morrison has filed multiple complaints against various homeowners in your neighborhood over the past few years. About 80% of them turn out to be unfounded. It is frustrating because it wastes city resources and creates unnecessary stress for residents. Is there anything I can do about the false complaint? Not really. Anyone can file a complaint, and we are obligated to investigate. But I will document in my report that the complaint was without merit. If she continues to file frivolous complaints, the city could potentially take action against her for abusing the system, but that is a high bar to reach. Robert left after assuring me that I would receive a letter within a week confirming that no violation had been found. I stood in my driveway, staring at my rock garden and feeling a mixture of relief and frustration. How much of my time and energy was Patricia going to waste before she gave up? The answer, it turned out, was a lot more. Over the next 3 months, Patricia escalated her campaign against me in ways that became increasingly unhinged. She sent letters to every homeowner in the neighborhood claiming that my rock garden was lowering their property values and urging them to pressure me to remove it. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook group calling me a rogue homeowner who had no respect for community standards. She even stood at the entrance to our neighborhood one Saturday morning with a clipboard, asking people to sign a petition demanding that the HOA board force me to remove my rock garden. Most of my neighbors ignored her. A few actually came by my house to tell me they thought my rock garden looked great and that Patricia was out of control. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Margaret Chen who lived 2 houses down, told me that Patricia had tried to fine her 2 years ago for having a bird feeder in her backyard because it attracted nuisance wildlife. Margaret had fought back and won, but the experience had been exhausting. She does this to people, Margaret said. She finds someone to target and then makes their life miserable until they either give in or fight back hard enough that she moves on to someone else. I am sorry you are her current victim, Isaac. The situation came to a head in early July. I was at work when I got a call from my next-door neighbor, Rick Santos. Rick was a firefighter who worked 24-hour shifts, so he was home during the day when I was at work. Isaac, you need to know what is happening at your house right now, Rick said, his voice urgent. What's going on? Patricia Morrison is in your front yard with 2 guys in a landscaping truck. They are loading your rocks into the truck. I felt my blood run cold. They are what? They are removing your rock garden. I went out to ask what they were doing, and Patricia said the HOA board had authorized the removal at their own expense since you refused to comply with the violation notice. I will be there in 10 minutes. Do not let them take anything else. I hung up, told my supervisor I had an emergency, and drove home faster than I probably should have. When I pulled onto my street, I saw exactly what Rick had described. A landscaping truck was parked in my driveway, and two men in work clothes were loading rocks into the back. Patricia was standing on my front lawn with her arms crossed, supervising the operation like a general overseeing a military campaign. I parked behind the landscaping truck, blocking it in, and jumped out of my car. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" I shouted. Patricia turned to me with a triumphant smile. "I am enforcing the HOA's violation notice. Since you refused to remove this eyesore yourself, the board authorized me to have it removed and bill you for the cost." The board tabled the violation. There was no vote to authorize this. I called a special emergency meeting yesterday. The vote was 3-2 in favor of immediate removal. You cannot hold an emergency meeting without notifying all homeowners. The CCRs require 48 hours notice for any board meeting. Patricia's smile faltered slightly. This was a special circumstance. I do not care what you call it. You are trespassing on my property and destroying my landscaping without authorization. Tell these men to put my rocks back right now, or I am calling the police. "Go ahead and call them," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false confidence. "I have the authority of the HOA board behind me." I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Patricia's expression changed from confident to uncertain as she realized I was serious. The 911 operator asked me to describe the emergency. I explained that people were on my property removing landscaping without my permission. The operator said she would send a unit right away. The two landscapers had stopped working and were looking nervously at each other. One of them, a young guy in his 20s, walked over to Patricia. "Madam, if the homeowner is saying we do not have permission to be here, we should probably stop." "You have my permission," Patricia insisted. "I am the HOA president." "But it is his property," the landscaper said. "I think we should wait for the police to sort this out." The police arrived about 5 minutes later, 2 officers in a Scottsdale PD cruiser. I recognized one of them, Officer Sarah Martinez, from a community policing event the city had held a few months earlier. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, showing her my property survey, the original HOA approval letter, and the notice from the code enforcement inspection confirming no violations. Officer Martinez then turned to Patricia. "Madam, do you have documentation showing that you have the authority to enter this property and remove the landscaping?" Patricia pulled out her phone and showed the officer what she claimed were minutes from the emergency board meeting. Officer Martinez read them carefully, then shook her head. "These minutes indicate the meeting was held yesterday, with less than 24 hours notice." According to Arizona state law governing homeowners associations, board meetings must be noticed to all members at least 48 hours in advance, unless it is a genuine emergency involving immediate threats to health or safety. A rock garden does not qualify. "But the HOA CCRs give me the authority to address violations," Patricia protested. "Not by trespassing on private property and destroying landscaping," Officer Martinez said. "Mr. Carmichael has documentation showing he received approval for this installation." Even if the HOA wanted to dispute that, they would need to go through the proper legal channels. They cannot just come onto someone's property and remove things. Patricia's face was turning purple. "This is ridiculous. I am trying to maintain the standards of our community, and you are treating me like a criminal." "Madam, I am going to issue you a warning for trespassing," Officer Martinez said, her tone professional but firm. If you or anyone acting on your behalf enters Mr. Carmichael's property again without his explicit permission, you will be arrested. Do you understand? This is not over, Patricia hissed, glaring at me. Officer Martinez turned to the landscapers. Did she pay you in advance? No, madam, the younger one said. We were supposed to bill the HOA after the job was done. My advice is to put back what you have removed, leave the property, and do not accept any more jobs from this woman without verifying that she has the legal authority to authorize the work. The landscapers spent the next hour putting my rocks back in approximately the right locations. It was not perfect, but it was close enough that I could fix it myself later. Patricia stood on the sidewalk the entire time, her face a mask of fury, watched by Officer Martinez to make sure she did not try anything else. After everyone had left, I called Marcus and told him what had happened. She actually came onto your property and started removing your landscaping. Marcus sounded stunned. Isaac, that is trespassing, destruction of property, and probably a few other things. You need to file a formal complaint with the police and consider getting a restraining order. A restraining order seems extreme, is it? This woman has harassed you for months, filed false complaints with code enforcement, and now she has literally come onto your property and tried to destroy your landscaping. What is it going to take for you to recognize that she is not going to stop? Marcus had a point. I went to the Scottsdale Police Department the next day and filed a formal complaint against Patricia Morrison for trespassing and destruction of property. I also filed complaints against the HOA board for holding an illegal meeting and authorizing illegal actions. The police investigation took about 3 weeks. During that time, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia had been removed as HOA president. Apparently, several board members had finally had enough of her behavior and called for her resignation. When she refused to resign, they held a special election and voted her out. Tom Hendricks took over as president, and one of his first acts was to send me a formal letter apologizing for Patricia's actions and confirming that my rock garden was in full compliance with all HOA rules. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. In mid-August, I received a summons to appear in small claims court. Patricia had filed a lawsuit against me personally, claiming that my rock garden had caused her emotional distress and damaged her property values. She was suing me for $15,000. I sat in my living room staring at the summons, feeling a combination of disbelief and exhaustion. This woman was relentless. I called Marcus immediately. Can she even do this? I asked. Anyone can file a lawsuit for anything, Marcus said. Whether she can win is a different question. This is clearly frivolous, but you will need to respond and defend yourself. I can represent you in small claims court if you want. How much is this going to cost me? I will do it for a flat fee of $2,000, which is well below my normal rate because we are friends and because this case is ridiculous. I agreed, and Marcus started preparing our defense. The court date was set for October 15th. In the meantime, I tried to get back to my normal life. I finished some additional planting in my rock garden, adding more native flowers and a beautiful ocotillo specimen that I had found at a local nursery. The garden was thriving in the summer heat, looking better than I had even imagined when I first started planting it. Every time I looked at it, I felt a sense of accomplishment and pride, but that feeling was always tinged with frustration over the amount of time and money and emotional energy Patricia had forced me to spend defending it. The court date arrived. I met Marcus at the courthouse at 8:30 in the morning. We found seats in the courtroom and waited for our case to be called. Patricia was there with her own attorney, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit who seemed far too qualified to be representing someone in small claims court over a rock garden dispute. When our case was called, we all approached the bench. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Catherine Reynolds, who looked like she had seen every kind of ridiculous case imaginable and had no patience for nonsense. Patricia's attorney presented their case first. He argued that my rock garden was an aesthetic nuisance that had caused his client significant emotional distress and had damaged property values in the neighborhood. He called Patricia to testify. Patricia took the stand and launched into a long, rambling description of how my rock garden had ruined her enjoyment of the neighborhood. She claimed it gave her anxiety every time she drove past my house. She said she had trouble sleeping because she was so worried about what it was doing to property values. She even claimed that her blood pressure had gone up because of the stress. Judge Reynolds listened with an expression that gave nothing away. When Patricia finally finished, the judge asked, "Miss Morrison, do you have any evidence that property values have actually declined?" "I have testimony from a real estate agent," Patricia said, and her attorney handed over a letter. Judge Reynolds read the letter, which was from a real estate agent claiming that non-traditional landscaping could potentially impact property values in some markets. The judge looked unimpressed. This letter says could potentially impact property values. It does not say that Mr. Carmichael's rock garden has actually caused any measurable decline. Do you have any actual evidence of declined property values? Comparable sales data? Appraisals? No, Your Honor, but it is obvious that an eyesore like that would hurt property values. What is obvious to you is not necessarily fact, Judge Reynolds said dryly. Mr. Carmichael, or rather your attorney, would you like to present your defense? Marcus stood up and methodically presented our case. He showed the judge my HOA application and approval letter. He showed the city code enforcement letter confirming no violations. He showed photographs of other houses in the neighborhood with similar landscaping. He showed the police report from the day Patricia had trespassed on my property. He presented a letter from a different real estate agent stating that desert landscaping often increased property values in Arizona because of water conservation benefits. Then, Marcus called me to testify. I described the entire timeline of events, from submitting my application to the confrontation with the landscapers. I explained how much time and money I had spent defending a project that had been properly approved from the beginning. When I finished, Judge Reynolds asked Patricia's attorney if he had any questions for me. He asked a few half-hearted questions about whether I had considered how my neighbors might feel about the rock garden, but it was clear his heart was not in it. I answered honestly that I had talked to many of my neighbors and most of them liked it. Judge Reynolds took about 30 seconds to make her decision. "Miss Morrison, your lawsuit is frivolous." Mr. Carmichael obtained proper approval for his landscaping project through the appropriate HOA channels. He has complied with all applicable codes and regulations. The fact that you personally do not like his aesthetic choices does not constitute a legal cause of action. Your claim of emotional distress is not supported by any credible evidence. I am dismissing your case with prejudice, meaning you cannot refile it. Furthermore, I am awarding Mr. Carmichael his attorney fees in the amount of $2,000, which you are ordered to pay within 30 days. Patricia's mouth fell open. "But, Your Honor, my decision is final, Miss Morrison. This case is dismissed. Next case." We filed out of the courtroom. Patricia and her attorney left immediately, but Marcus and I stood in the hallway for a moment, both feeling a sense of relief. "It is over," Marcus said. "She cannot come after you again for this." "What about the attorney fees? Will she actually pay? If she does not, we will garnish her wages or put a lien on her property. Trust me, she will pay." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The nightmare was finally over. Patricia had lost at every turn. The HOA board had removed her, the police had warned her, and now a judge had ruled against her and ordered her to pay my legal fees. There was no way she could continue her crusade. But I had underestimated her capacity for vindictiveness. One last time. 3 weeks after the court case, I came home from work to find my rock garden vandalized. Someone had spray-painted obscenities across the larger rocks in bright red paint. Several of my plants had been pulled up and thrown into the street. My ocotillo had been snapped in half. I stood there staring at the destruction, feeling a surge of anger unlike anything I had experienced before. I knew immediately who had done this, but I also knew that proving it would be difficult. I called the police and filed a report. Officer Martinez came out to take photographs and statements. I told her I suspected Patricia Morrison, and I explained the history of our conflict. Officer Martinez said they would investigate, but without direct evidence or witnesses, it would be hard to prove who was responsible. I spent the next 2 days cleaning up the damage. The spray paint required a special solvent to remove, and even then, some of the rocks were permanently stained. I had to replace several plants. The ocotillo could not be saved. Then I got a call from Rick Santos, my neighbor. "Isaac, I think I have something that might help you. I installed a security camera on my house a few months ago after someone stole a package from my porch. The camera faces the street, and it might have caught whoever vandalized your yard." I went over to Rick's house immediately. He pulled up the footage from the night of the vandalism, and there, clear as day, was Patricia Morrison. The timestamp showed 3 in the morning. She was wearing dark clothes and gloves, but her face was clearly visible under the streetlights. The video showed her spray painting the rocks, pulling up plants, and breaking my ocotillo with a piece of rebar. Rick downloaded the footage to a USB drive, and I took it straight to the police station. Officer Martinez watched the video and shook her head. "This is enough for an arrest warrant. Vandalism, trespassing, destruction of property. Mr. Carmichael, I am sorry you have had to deal with this." Patricia Morrison was arrested 2 days later. The Scottsdale police showed up at her house at 6 in the morning and took her into custody. The neighborhood was buzzing with the news by lunchtime. Patricia was charged with criminal trespassing and criminal damage, both misdemeanors. At her arraignment, she pled not guilty and was released on her own recognizance. Her trial was scheduled for January. In the meantime, I filed for a restraining order, which was granted. Patricia was ordered to stay at least 300 feet away from me and my property at all times. Since she lived only 3 doors down, this essentially meant she could not leave her house without violating the order unless she went out through her backyard. The Sunset Ridge HOA held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Patricia from the board permanently and ban her from ever serving in any HOA leadership position again. Several homeowners, emboldened by my successful fight against Patricia's bullying, came forward with their own stories of harassment and abuse. The board hired a mediator to help reform the HOA's practices and create better checks and balances to prevent any future board member from wielding unchecked power. Patricia's criminal trial took place in mid-January. Marcus came with me for moral support, even though he was not involved in the criminal case. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor presented the security camera footage, the police reports from all of Patricia's previous incidents with me, and testimony from several neighbors about her pattern of harassment. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that she had been under extreme stress and had experienced a mental health crisis, which was why she had acted irrationally. The prosecutor countered that a pattern of harassment and vindictiveness spanning 8 months was not a momentary mental health crisis, but rather a deliberate campaign of intimidation that had escalated to criminal behavior. The judge found Patricia guilty on both counts. She was sentenced to 90 days in jail, suspended, with 2 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my property, plus court costs. Additionally, she was required to attend anger management classes and complete 100 hours of community service. Most importantly to me, the restraining order was extended for the full duration of her probation. Patricia was forbidden from any contact with me, direct or indirect, for the next 2 years. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with Marcus, watching the gray January sky and feeling like I could finally breathe again. "It is really over now," Marcus said. "I still cannot believe it got this far, all over a rock garden." "It was never about the rock garden," Marcus said. "It was about control. People like Patricia Morrison need to control their environment and everyone in it. When someone stands up to them, they cannot handle it. They escalate and escalate until they finally cross a line they cannot come back from." I thought about that as I drove home. Marcus was right. If I had given in at the beginning and removed my rock garden, Patricia would have moved on to her next victim and the cycle would have continued. By standing my ground, I had not only defended my own rights, but potentially saved other homeowners from future harassment. My rock garden is still there, thriving in my front yard. I added a few more plants after the vandalism, including a beautiful desert willow tree that blooms with pink flowers in the spring. My water bill is a fraction of what it was when I had grass. Birds and butterflies visit daily. My neighbors frequently compliment me on how nice it looks. Patricia Morrison ended up selling her house and moving out of Sunset Ridge about 6 months into her probation. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she moved to a condo in Phoenix with no HOA. I hoped she had learned something from the experience, but I suspected she was the type of person who would always blame everyone else for her problems. The Sunset Ridge HOA underwent significant reforms after Patricia's removal. The new board implemented term limits, created an ombudsman position to handle homeowner complaints, and revised the CCRs to make the approval processes clearer and more transparent. Tom Hendricks served as president for 1 year and then stepped down, stating that he had accomplished what he set out to do in reforming the organization. I stayed active in the HOA after that, attending meetings regularly and even serving on the Architectural Review Committee for a year. I figured that the best way to prevent another Patricia Morrison from taking over was to stay engaged and make sure the organization remained accountable to the homeowners it was supposed to serve. My friend Marcus still jokes that I should write a book about my experience called "How I Survived My HOA and Lived to Tell About It." Maybe someday I will. For now, I am content to sit in my backyard in the evenings, looking at my rock garden and knowing that I stood up for myself when it mattered. The whole experience taught me several important lessons. First, that bureaucratic bullies rely on people being too tired or intimidated to fight back. Second, that documentation is everything when you are dealing with organizations or individuals who abuse power. Third, that standing up for yourself, even when it is exhausting and stressful, is sometimes the only way to stop an unjust situation from continuing. I also learned that there are more good people than bad in most communities. For every Patricia Morrison, there are a dozen people like Margaret Chen, Rick Santos and the other neighbors who supported me offered encouragement and stood up against harassment when they saw it happening. Those people restored my faith in the concept of community and reminded me why I had wanted to buy a house in a neighborhood in the first place. It has been almost a year now since Patricia's trial. Life in Sunset Ridge has returned to normal. We have neighborhood barbecues in the summer and a holiday lights contest in December. The HOA still sends out reminders about trash can placement and proper parking, but they do it politely and reasonably. Nobody has tried to fine anyone for having a bird feeder or for painting their door the wrong shade of beige. Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if I had just given in and removed my rock garden when Patricia first demanded it. I would have saved myself months of stress, thousands of dollars in legal fees, and countless hours of documentation and court appearances. But I also would have let a bully win. I would have set a precedent that anyone with a little bit of authority could push people around without consequences. And I would have lost something beautiful that I had created, something that brought me joy every single day. So no, I do not regret fighting back. My rock garden represents more to me now than just an attractive, water-wise landscaping choice. It represents the principle that homeowners have rights, that rules matter, and that even small acts of resistance against petty tyranny can make a difference. On warm Arizona evenings, I sometimes sit on my front porch with a cold drink and watch the sunset paint my rocks in shades of gold and amber. Hummingbirds dart between the flowers. Desert spiny lizards bask on the warm stones. The ocotillo I planted to replace the one Patricia destroyed has grown tall and is covered in brilliant red blooms. A few months ago, a young couple moved into the house that Patricia used to own. They came over to introduce themselves one Saturday morning. The woman, whose name was Wendy Anderson, admired my rock garden and asked if I knew anyone who could help them design something similar for their yard. I gave her the contact information for the landscape designer who had helped me, and I also told her the whole story of what had happened with Patricia and the HOA. I figured they deserved to know what kind of organization they were now part of, even though things had changed significantly. Wendy and her husband listened with wide eyes. When I finished, Wendy said, "So the HOA is okay now. We do not have to worry about getting harassed over every little thing." "The HOA is fine now," I assured her. "They learned some hard lessons. Just make sure you document everything, follow the proper procedures, and do not be afraid to stand up for yourself if something does not seem right." They thanked me for the information and the advice. A few months later, I noticed they had started their own desert landscaping project in their front yard. It looked great. The incident with Patricia and the rock garden became something of a legend in Sunset Ridge. New homeowners heard the story from their neighbors. The reforms that were implemented in the HOA became a model that other communities looked to. I even got a call from a local news reporter who wanted to do a story about HOA reform, using my experience as a case study. I politely declined. I had gotten enough publicity from the situation, and I just wanted to move on with my life. But I did agree to speak at a city council meeting when they were discussing proposed legislation to regulate HOA practices in Scottsdale. I told my story briefly and urged the council to pass rules requiring transparency, accountability, and due process in HOA governance. The legislation eventually passed, and I like to think my testimony helped make that happen. These days, my biggest concern about my property is deciding what new plants to add each season and making sure I am keeping up with the minimal maintenance my rock garden requires. It is a far cry from the stress of dealing with violation notices, trespassing incidents, and court dates. I ran into Tom Hendricks at the grocery store a few weeks ago. He told me that the HOA had received an award from a state homeowners association organization for implementing best practices in governance and transparency. He thanked me again for forcing the issue and creating the catalyst for change. "You know," Tom said, "what Patricia did was terrible, but in a weird way, she did the neighborhood a favor. Her behavior was so extreme that it forced us to confront problems that had been building for years. We now have an HOA that actually serves the homeowners instead of trying to control them." I appreciated Tom's perspective, but I still would have preferred to achieve those reforms without having to go through months of harassment and stress. Nevertheless, I was glad that something positive had come out of the situation. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized that it changed me in subtle but important ways. I used to be someone who avoided conflict at all costs, who would rather give in than cause a scene. Now I understand that there are times when standing your ground is not just about defending yourself, but about defending principles that matter. Rules and procedures exist to protect everyone, not just the people in power. When those rules are ignored or abused, someone has to be willing to push back. I also learned that documentation and patience are powerful tools. Patricia Morrison was counting on me to lose my temper, to make mistakes, to give her ammunition to use against me. By staying calm, keeping detailed records, and following proper procedures, I was able to defeat her tactics and expose her behavior for what it was. The rock garden itself has become something of a neighborhood attraction. People walking their dogs often stop to admire it. Photographers have asked permission to take pictures of it. A local magazine even featured it in an article about water-wise landscaping in Arizona. Every time someone compliments it, I feel a sense of vindication. This thing that Patricia Morrison called an eyesore and tried so hard to destroy has become something that brings beauty and inspiration to others. I have also become friends with several other homeowners who had their own battles with Patricia over the years. We formed a kind of informal support network, sharing stories and advice. Some of them had given in to her demands and still regretted it. Others had fought back in various ways. We all agreed that the reforms in the HOA had created a much healthier and more pleasant community environment. Margaret Chen, the elderly woman who had fought Patricia over her bird feeder, told me that she felt like she could finally enjoy her home without constantly looking over her shoulder. She invited me over for tea one afternoon and showed me her backyard, which was filled with bird feeders, native plants, and garden ornaments. It was beautiful and personal and exactly the kind of space that should be celebrated, not penalized. As I sit here now, almost a year after Patricia's trial, I can honestly say that I am glad I fought for my rock garden. Yes, it cost me time and money and stress. Yes, there were moments when I questioned whether it was worth it. But in the end, I defended something that mattered to me. I exposed a pattern of abuse that had been harming my community, and I helped create positive change that will benefit homeowners in Sunset Ridge for years to come. My rock garden is more than just rocks and plants. It is a testament to the importance of standing up for yourself, following the rules even when others do not, and refusing to let bullies win. Every time I look at it, I am reminded that sometimes the small battles are worth fighting because they represent larger principles that define the kind of world we want to live in. And on those warm Arizona evenings, when the sun sets behind the mountains and paints everything in shades of orange and gold, I sit on my porch and appreciate not just the beauty of my rock garden, but the peace of knowing that I stood my ground and won.